You are listening to the Practicing the Art of Small Business podcast with Shannyn Merlo and Julie Parker. Enjoy this conversation about business, leadership, and the self-awareness journey to great success.
Hello, Julie, and hello, listeners to Practicing the Art of Small Business. We're on episode number 57, Julie.
57. Goodness gracious, 57 wildly interesting conversations at the minimum, because sometimes we have wildly interesting conversations and we don't hit record.
Could you imagine if we did like just outtakes? We recorded all the conversations we didn't have and just uploaded them. I mean, most of it would be like Shannon's therapy sessions, but you know, it is what it is.
That's right. What are we going to do? Not delve deep? Come on.
Come on, that's not what we do here. Talking about delving deep, Julie.
That could go anywhere.
I'm jumping straight in today because I just figure why not. Yeah. Perhaps I talk about the topic of this conversation that we are recording because it's not too controversial, but it actually is turning out to be controversial in some spaces. Should I let my team members work from home?
That is such a great question. It's been very topical for the last number of years especially.
Yeah, but it seems like there's sort of a coming back around to workplaces actually wanting team members to be in the office a lot more. And it came up because there's been some toing and froing within a client's workspace that I work with. And so I thought, why not just throw it on the dartboard and see what lands? Yeah. Throw it on the dartboard, throw a dart at it, see what hits. Who knows? Like there's a whole bunch of analogies around throwing things and darts and poking my eye out and stuff like that. So.
Oh, that's right. And I think it's a fantastic topic because, you know, many people were forced to at a certain point over the last number of years. Some people have been succeeding beautifully in this space, others not so much, and others are really having a hard time bringing their people back into the office again. They're really quite established in their home environment now, or their alternative environment now.
Well, so let me start with my position, because prior to COVID, I was always a supporter of the fact that we shouldn't be managing team members because they're in the office 9 to 5, because that's the old way of managing, right? If you're in the office 9 to 5, then I'm going to assume you're doing the right job. Whereas in reality, if someone's able to deliver on the expectations of their role between 6 and 12 or 9 and 12, 3-hour day, then that's your problem as a boss. A lot of people are ineffective during their time at work. Just because we have to be there for 8 hours doesn't necessarily mean we're effective for those 8 hours. So it's a really interesting point around, even before COVID, I was a big supporter of saying we need to actually be managing based on objectives, not on time in the office. However, what's coming out now is obviously, you know, we changed and the world changed over the C word. But now we're seeing the impacts of, and I think management changed during that time because they realised, well, we've got to be more flexible. There's parents who are homeschooling, and we as workplaces have to be more flexible around 9 to 5. What does that look like? There are a lot of people who are actually working later at night because they were homeschooling their kids and things like that, and workplaces accepted it. But now we're seeing a bit of a fallout, and it does feel like workplaces are realising, it from my perspective, that they want people to be back in the office more, but employees are saying, nah, it was fine. What's good for the goose is good for the gander sort of scenario. Your thoughts, Julie?
It depends on so much, doesn't it, Shannyn, whether this is going to be a successful process for your particular company or not. I mean, number one is profession and the roles within a dental practice, which is my world. The dentist can't work remotely. The assistant, the receptionist can't work remotely.
Surely the dentist can't, can just kind of instruct me like I could just, and they could be like,
I've sent you out a drill, so I'm going to tell you how to do that. However, the practice manager, can they work remotely? I've seen that happen, and whether that's working or not is another issue. But there are some roles that you think to yourself, well, that one can we get away with having that done as a remote role? If this person's asking for it, can we do that? And I think that's possibly one of the big questions that I have. What are you basing the decision on? Because usually in a workplace environment where we've got clients and customers and all the things, we have as the bar, is this the ideal result for the worker that you're managing, and is this part of your role as well as to interact with clients where they have complaints or whatever? What's the best result we can get from that interaction, that person being there fulfilling that role? And so when we think to ourselves, could we get away with that person working remotely? That's quite a different question than, are we still going to achieve our standard of success when it comes to the people management, the client management that this person's actually responsible for? And I think quite often those two questions are quite different. The answers to those two questions are quite different.
Yeah, I agree. I think also what's playing a part, particularly with the client, that it's kind of topical at the moment, is a question about culture in the organisation. And I think that that's definitely something that we want to talk about. Can you build a really cohesive culture when you've got people working remotely, and especially when they can actually work on site? This is not, where you've got global teams, because obviously you can't, and you've got to have a hybrid scenario. But are teams more or less cohesive when there's an option for them to be in the office and they don't come into the office? So I think all of these things come into play. You're absolutely right, though, from a profession perspective, because there are some I can't even say it. There are some professions that really can't work from home.
Yeah,
such as your dentist or your
and
podiatrist.
So what we're probably talking about right now are the ones that, yes, they can absolutely work from home and get equal to or even possibly better results. Let's talk about the drawbacks in those sort of scenarios. Things seem to be working well, but you touched on culture. I think that's one of the things that that area actually might suffer.
I think so. So what the research says, Julie, because we obviously did a large amount of research before we came on, like we do on most of our...
Yes, 2 minutes of search. Yes.
2 minutes. A lot of remote workers report challenges with communication and collaboration issues, which I think is fair, that those water cooler chats do actually make a really big difference with connection to your employees. I know that when I hop on a Zoom, it's like, oh yes, how are you? Yep, good, 1 minute in. Okay, let's get to work. Let's do the thing. Whereas there's that intangible when you sit down and you have lunch with someone and you find out about how they are and that they've got kids and, what's going on in their life. And it's far more connected from that perspective. And so when you've got and I think that also when there's communication issues, I personally find that when you get in front of someone, those communication issues do tend to go away much more than via a Zoom, or certainly if you're doing, like, trying to have a Slack conversation to get on the same page. It's almost impossible. So I think that plays a part. Thoughts on that, Julie?
Yeah, I agree. I think to myself about my own position. I work from home with my business, and most of my meetings are conducted online. But the minute that collaboration is required, you do feel like it brings it down from quite a broad thing down to quite a tunnel view process. Because you're right, when we get onto an online meeting, we're on an online meeting for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. Let's get into it. And any social chit chat could be deemed by some people as a little bit of waste of time. Come on, people, let's go. We've got things to get to. And so again, what does success look like, Shannyn? If the success looks like we get some kind of result at the end of this meeting, the kind of conversation that you're going to have may not result in as good as, this is one of the many steps, people, we're going to trying to at some point get to a really fantastic strategy or list of insights or whatever the things are. And whereas the structure of the online meetings can kind of take away that that creativity that some people are extremely talented in, and that's one of their wonderful characteristics. How creative can you be when you put so many restrictions on it that you've got the floor for 10 minutes and then you have to listen to everyone else and we're off in an hour? And so therefore, those team members that are quite creative, they may find that the limitations placed upon them is reducing down the level of impact and contribution they would normally make.
Well, I also find that it's easier to be distracted when you're on a Zoom. I know I'm guilty of every now and again, phone's buzzed, I'll just quickly send a text message while someone's not looking. You would never do that in a face-to-face meeting, would you?
That's true, and you can see their eyes kind of go up and scroll across their browser and click on different pages, and they're kind of looking, why over here?
Absolutely. I had a meeting earlier today, and while I was talking, they were typing. They weren't typing notes about the meeting, and I was like, come on, mate. Whereas it just wouldn't happen when you're in a face-to-face scenario. And so that can really create that disconnect. I'm sure, obviously, you can set standards within your organisation and be able to call people out on that level of behaviour. But I do think that we aren't necessarily as engaged online as what we were or are face-to-face. But you also did make a good point around the efficiency of the Zoom meeting. I love an efficient meeting. I hate a meeting that just drags on and people chitty-chat and you're like, oh my God, this is hours of my life that have gone. However, I do agree that something gets lost, that creativity, that water cooler conversation, that's missed. It's just missed. It doesn't happen. And there's the difference between saying, Julie, I'm hungry, do you have something to eat? And you being able to give me something as a result. Like,
you
yes,
think I'm quite generous and
yes,
responsive to your needs.
You've provided food to me before. Obviously not online, but I'm trying
to
I had a banquet.
Outside that door, there's a banquet. Yeah, I'll see you in there.
Fantastic. And me kind of saying in the kitchen, oh gosh, I've got nothing to eat. And you going, Shannyn, I've got a sandwich. Would you like the sandwich? So it's very different. And I think I don't know if that analogy played out, but I'm hoping that it worked out. Like in the Zoom, in the online environment, you have to be very pointed about, here's my problem, here's what I need from you as a solution. Whereas I think the more ad hoc environment of working together, you can pick up on nuances and actually offer support, suggestions, help, connection and collaboration without the need for someone to directly say, I need this.
Because what if that person that had that helpful resource to share with you, they'd already had their time to speak, they didn't get another chance to speak, and then the end of the meeting, you're like, should I message them? Oh no, look, and then they get distracted with the next thing, and all of a sudden there's no more of that kind of, not meaningless communication, meaningful communication, but that different type of communication that you wouldn't necessarily raise those things in a meeting. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And so I suppose there's a question of, are we missing out as a result of not having that?
One of the other things I think is when we're talking about different generations, because one of the things that I'm focusing on right now is, we're getting younger people into our dental industry. I mean, they've always been there, but it seems to be a bit more of an issue at the moment, where I've got teams saying, where's the level of professionalism? Where's the work ethic of these young people? And for some reason, and I don't think this is across the board by any stretch of the imagination, it just might be niched down into dental practice situations. I'm not quite sure. However, it has come up as a need of, what do we do as a company? What do I do as an educator of dental teams to provide that knowledge and awareness to younger team members? This is what it means to be professional. This is what work ethic is. And when you think about it, by the time you've hit 30 or 40 years old, you have evolved into the professional person that you are, and what the values that you work to, and the level of integrity and ethic and all the things. And part of those teachings have come from your parents, from your teachers possibly, from your social circle, maybe not, but maybe from but this is the thing, it certainly does also come from people that you work with who, without even realising it, are modelling ideal professional behaviour, and without even realising it, a younger generation are observing that and learning how to do that. That would certainly be lost to a large degree when we're working remotely.
That is very, very true, and that I'm just going to take what you've said and kind of put it into my I'm hungry scenario. It really is. It really is that case of, here's how we say it needs to be done, but if I can't observe you doing it, then how can I pick you up and help you to know that that is not how we do it, or that it could be done better, or have you considered this? We don't want to go into a micromanagement scenario, but it is a case of that it's so much easier to support people's growth when they're there, and it can just be one of those quick conversations. Oh, hey, I heard you say this way. What would be better is to say it that way. That aligns much more with the way that we do things here. Do you have any questions, concerns, problems? So on. Great, it's done. Whereas if you're not monitoring that, if you're not able to monitor that, then that behaviour can continue, whatever it is, can continue for 6 months before you can pick it up. And by that stage, the person's entrenched within that way of doing things, so it's much harder to manage and change.
That brings up a really beautiful point. Observe customer service. That, when you're working with people, quite often those little adjustments, those little opportunities for training come up because you overhear or observe that team member behaving in a way that could be getting better results if it was to be improved or brought up a level of customer service. Whereas the only way you can track when your remote workers are actually providing effective, hopefully ideal customer service is to read back through their emails and listen to all their phone conversations that may have been recorded. And who's going to do that? Who's got time to do all that?
Well, I have also, I think I'm pushing the agenda of work from home's not ideal, but I think that there are great scenarios for it. I'm a big fan of it myself. I feel like I'm effective working from home. I'm probably could be more effective working from other places, but that's okay. I had a client who would, for the 8 hours that they were at the desk, they'd have an open Zoom link with their remote team member. So that team member worked overseas, but that was a way of essentially being next to each other and being able to say, oh, hey, I'm working on this client file. Can you send me the whatever? So it's kind of almost like working next to them. So I think that there's ways of being able to work with each other in that way, but obviously that has its own challenges and scenarios. You don't want to be eavesdropping on someone's Zoom meeting while you're sitting on a Zoom meeting.
And I'm always conscious of the fact I've worked in places where they all of a sudden brought in cameras and you're like, okay, I've got to be on my best behaviour. You quickly forget that they're there, and next thing, you're picking your undies out of your backside and you're eating like a little hurried little piggy, and you go, oh, probably wouldn't. And so I keep forgetting those damn cameras are there. And I behave in ways that I would not normally if I thought people were looking at me.
Yeah, but it's exactly the same thing as I would consider myself a reasonably okay typer, but as soon as someone's watching me, it's all wrong. I'm getting the spelling all wrong. I don't know what my words are. It's all a bit of an issue. So there is some sort of disincentive there for sure. One of the other things that was noted in research, the research that we did, Julie, was that employees report overwork and burnout when they're working from home because there's less of a separation between home and work. And there's this, certainly over COVID, people were working longer hours or broken up hours. And so it's not that sort of 9 to 5, but then it's 6 to 8, 9 to 12, 3 to 6, 9 till 12. So then it becomes a 24-hour job sort of. And so that can, you and I are familiar with just working whenever and being used to that. But I know that some people really struggle without not having that separation between here's me at home and here's me at work. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think we've got to be really careful about this side of it because with all the new applications and technology, we can be contactable all the time, regardless of the workplace laws that are slowly being implemented and things like that. And I think when, two things, when you now work from home, the companies may be more inclined to say, as long as you achieve this level of productivity or success, you do it, at the hours that suit you, and they may actually end up doing that, whether that's a formal agreement with the employment with your employer or not. But it can then, unless you are naturally good or you've read enough books and done enough research into mental health and burnout and the things to do to make sure that those sort of things aren't happening, most people haven't done that level of research, and it's reactive. Their learning is reactive. Oh gosh, I'm now burnt out, so now I have to take steps to not be burnt out. Now I know how to work in the future, but we could have avoided the burnout in the first place if we'd known more. But there's another aspect to this. I don't have children, you don't have children, so we work from home, and if we want to work an extra hour, that only affects us. But what happens when you've got children at home and all of a sudden you're bringing workplace parent into the home environment, whereas traditionally Mum, Dad was always available to me when I was at home and I went to my parent, they were always available to me. Now I can only talk to them at certain times. Now it has to be a big problem for me to actually get their attention. And with little children, it may not be as easily understood, this dynamic of working from home. And so I wonder, can it be quite disruptive to the family unit at times?
Interesting point.
No,
it's a great point. Although just because it's fun to play tennis with you, is there a benefit to having parents working from home as opposed to being away from home for 12 hours of the day, let's say? Although when they're there, they might not be fully present. Are them being there? My English is terrible today. My ability to use words.
On a computer while she's being observed.
It's because it's going to end up on the tubes. My brain doesn't work. Are there benefits to being at home instead of spending all that time away from the office for the family dynamic? I don't know.
And I think, Charles's thing is that, I think it comes into play. There will be equal number of benefits and drawbacks. And that's what we're talking about with this, isn't it? Recognise for your team, in your business, with your clients and with their responsibilities, what are those benefits? What are those drawbacks? We'll keep being interested in both of those lists. We do whatever we can to mitigate the drawbacks or to manage the drawbacks and to really benefit from the benefits. But it's never going to be one or the other isn't ever going to be, I think, solely the best way to go. Because, and one of the other drawbacks that I had for working from home is, I think we're already suffering a bit of an anti-socialisation of people because they can maintain all their relationships online and don't know what you're talking about, Julie. Don't know what you're saying. What? And that evolving skill that we learn through living life and interacting one-on-one with people, we evolve this social side of ourselves, which helps build our own level of self-confidence and happiness with life and builds up our mental health. And some people are fine without being around a bunch of people. Introverts are totally comfortable working from home, I imagine. And so they see... Gosh, it can be damn challenging working with those bunch of lunatics. They challenge me all the time. But what if you are inclined to be a little bit antisocial or so not comfortable with social that it then becomes an impediment to the way you build relationships and the number of relationships you build and the depth to which you build them? That's a definite drawback, isn't it?
It's a really, really interesting point you bring up there, and it's probably more of a philosophical conversation, so I'm going to go really meta on this now. Do we as workplaces have a responsibility to improve the overall socialisation of the youth? Because there are a lot of people who are young now who have reported that they won't answer a phone call, they won't talk on the phone at all, they will only communicate via text. And so if we create work environments where sure, you can turn up but not have your camera on because that's socially awkward or anxiety producing for you, want to be respectful. sure, you can just message us through Slack. Do we have a responsibility to actually help socialize people? Do you know what I mean? Because in work environments are inherently pushing the comfort zone all the time. Right? Because you don't get necessarily, unless you're the boss, you don't get to choose everyone that you work with. So you've got to learn to work with different people, and you wouldn't do that in your social circles because you exclude people that you don't get along with. But in a work environment, you have to learn.
Yeah, that's part of life. Getting along with people that we would not normally get along with. Going through all those thoughts and emotions of this person irritates me. Now I can't stand the sight of them. Now I just wish they would quit. how can I get them out of this company? And no, I've got to work with them. I like my job. They've got a right to work as well. I think I have to force myself to go and have a conversation with that person, get them to know them a little bit more. We've got a social gathering coming up for work. I'll make sure I go and have a connection with that person. And then you go, oh, God, now that I found out more about them, they aren't a bad person after all. So now I'm finding it far easier to work with them. And all that resilience that we build up as a human being, the social resilience that we build up as a human being, how easy would it be in this world to never go down those uncomfortable paths? And there would be a cost to that.
Yeah, I mean, I know myself. Since COVID, I've happily isolated myself. Not so much in business, and I do network and things like that. But I tell you what, if I didn't have to speak with people other than it's my actual job, I probably would be okay for a decent amount of time. Because if for those who are listening, I put my hand up in the introvert side of things. I do like people, and my job is communicating with people. But I do need time away from humans to recharge. I really do, because I find human interaction a little bit, it can be challenging.
Absolutely, can be challenging.
But if I wasn't forced to do it in certain scenarios, I'd end up as a hobbit with, I don't have my cat anymore, but I'd certainly, my next dog's going to be a cat, and then it'd just be cat on cat on cat. So, hobbit with many cats.
And it's interesting, you said earlier how much of the responsibility lies with the employer of creating an environment that is conducive with mental health. And I think there's two questions there. And I think that, number one, it's a question that the employer can ask that of themselves. That can become part of your values, for example, your leadership values. We are going to make sure we proactively nurture the mental health of our people. So that could include sending them off to courses or exposing them to particular training, presentations, do surveys, all the things. But so there's two questions. Are we going to actively take some level of responsibility for the mental health of our employees? And a lot of employers might go, no, enough is enough. Can't we just get along with the job? Which I totally get as well. But the second question, which is a different question, is let's make sure the environment that we do create isn't damaging. So one is, what are we going to do? What are we going to introduce to make it better? But quite a separate question, which I think is a very worthy question of every employer, is have I got anything in place with the environment that I create that actually can be damaging? Let's just take away those things.
Mm. Well, I mean,
gossiping being one of them. Gossiping is one of those things where there's not going to be a workplace that promotes gossiping. However, most workplaces may have a gossiping policy, because at the very least we're going to make sure it doesn't happen here, because that's bad. And it makes me wonder, does gossiping happen with remote working as much?
I don't know. It'd be interesting to know that. I don't know. It's been so long.
I'll ask everybody behind their backs to find out.
Sounds like a good way of doing the research. You mentioned two things there, Julie. One is, are we responsible for the mental well-being of our team members? In Australia, yes, we are. Directors have a direct liability for occupational health and safety and mental well-being. There's new laws that were put in place last year in 2023. And so working from home is one of those things that impact that, because directors have a liability to make sure that their team are psychologically well. How can you ensure that your team member is psychologically well if you're not able to interact with them on a regular basis outside of a Zoom meeting, because you can't 1 hour a day, 1 hour a week, you might be communicating with them face to face. You can't pick up on that. People
And as you
can
said
put
before, when you're working with people on site with each other, you're getting a sense of they seem a bit off today. I'm going to have a quiet word, make sure everything's okay. That's gone. Yeah.
We also see them interacting with other team members, so they might be a bit short, and you might pull them aside and say, "Are you okay? I just kind of saw that, and I just want to check in." Well, you're not going to see that if you're not part of the meeting that they were in, are you?
That's it.
The other thing that you said is, have I got anything in place that creates mental distress? Well, it's interesting to consider, well, where's the balance between pushing the comfort zone and creating mental distress? And so I don't know if we need to answer that, but I think that certainly, gossiping and any activity that is out there to create distress we shouldn't be doing. But having experienced social and personal anxiety in my life, I do know that it becomes easier and easier and easier for your circle of comfort to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then everything becomes more difficult because the circle of comfort is so tiny. And so then anything that challenges that circle of comfort is uncomfortable and creates distress. But the only way to get better from a anxiety perspective, having experienced it myself, and certainly social anxiety, is to continue to, as safely as possible, put yourself in these situations that expand that comfort zone, because you've got to retrain your brain to sort of say, okay, I had that experience, I'm still safe, I'm still okay. So I do think that there's a question between, well, what's within the acceptable realms of pushing the comfort zone from a workplace perspective, but not causing distress. But as I finish this thought, I think that as a leader, you can do that much more easily when you're face-to-face with an employee than if they're working remotely.
Yeah, that's right. I like to always bring things back to a parent-child frame as a way of helping us identify what should my role be now as the leader of a group of people. And you would never send your child away to camp, for example, and have them gone for extended periods of time without properly checking in. And the kind of conversations that you'd have with them would be quite different, other than what activities did you get done today. Like if they're away for 3 months, if they're away for a week, you go a week without seeing them. That's all groovy. I think it's part of the process. You don't have contact with your parents for a week, and that should be okay. But if they were gone for a month, 2 months, 3 months, you would have these check-ins, more than just a postcard check-in. This is what I did today. But you would have a check-in. How are you going? How are you going? You getting along well with everybody? Everyone helping you feel supported? Yeah? Feel good? Eating right? You get enough exercise? And so you'd be doing a kind of a care check. So what is it? What do they do when they come around to the house? Welfare check. You're doing like a welfare check on them. And so I think that's a bit of an indication of what we do. We have as an organisation that we are here not to reside in the comfort zone, but to reside in the learning zone. Growth is one of our core values. However, we have steps in place to make sure we're never putting people in the panic zone where there's overwhelm and anxiety. And so if you do have those remote workers, then having those welfare check-ins on a routine basis may be something that can help that space.
I think that's something to be aware of. I don't know if I mentioned on our podcast, but a client of mine started.
You can mention it now.
I can mention it now. I'm just wondering whether we've done it before and I'm on the broken record. But a client of mine started doing listening meetings with the team. And this was not a management meeting. It was an opportunity to just tell me what your problems are, tell me where you're at, being really curious and just listening. And there was so much value that happened as a result of those listening meetings. And so those listening meetings can be that welfare check, pulse check. How are you doing? Yeah. What's going on? What's working? What's not working? That sort of thing.
Magnificent. I'm going through a series of one-on-ones with a client at the moment. I've got about 23 team members. And the results I got from reading through their written survey And it was a lengthy written survey they had organised. I think there were about 39 questions, quite lengthy. And I had a certain level of understanding, but having these one-on-ones with people, gosh, it's just been a completely different experience and different takeaways, and fabulous takeaways to really, implement change and celebrate the things that are going well. So yes, those sort of listening meetings sound fantastic.
From an employee perspective, Julie, I think one of the benefits is not having to travel.
I wrote that down, travel time.
When I started my business, I made a determination that I would almost never put myself in a position where I would have to drive during peak traffic because
frustration.
Peak traffic.
Yeah.
Frustration. I'd rather poke my eye out. Not really, because
and you don't be able to be caught in traffic twice then, because
I know, right?
2 eyes. Then what do you do?
Pretty sure one eye kind of starts to render you slightly, in trouble with being able to get your license, I think. I don't know. But anyway, so I do understand
no more peak hour traffic because you're not driving. So kind of poking your eye out helps the situation.
Yes, sorry. Can't drive, have to take public transport, which then takes longer because Melbourne public transport, hello. But what responsibility does the employer have to be compassionate about travel time for staff? And the reason I say this is it did come up with the working from home, where one of the employees lived quite far away and was like, look, I want to work from home because it takes me 1.5, 2 hours to get into the office each day. And part of the conversation is like, is that our fault that you decided to move? The office didn't move. So where's the business's responsibility to be compassionate and empathetic, do you think?
Yeah. And is that then the good enough reason to have the person work? I'm thrilled that you raised that, because that's one of the issues that has come up in my world as well, but I live so far away, so therefore, it makes better sense if I work from home, and now petrol prices are so much higher. Like if I can't work from home, is there any way of getting a bit of a pay rise, because my cost of living has expanded more than people around me?
Yeah. Is there a responsibility, or is it a case of too bad, so sad?
I think it lies in the middle, doesn't it? It is one of those situations where, well, let's have a look at what everything would look like with you working from home. Because one of and if it all ticks a bunch of benefit boxes, and the drawback boxes are ones that we are willing to accommodate for, then let's test it and see. And I think we always have to do a test it and see process and make sure those employees are absolutely on board with it. If this is not working to the both parties being really happy with it, you will be asked to come back on site, and that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. But I think there does need to be that level of compassion around things, because if it's going to work, then that's great. But then you come back to a fairness perspective. Why does she get to work from home and I don't? Because I happen to live 15 minutes away from home. And so that is one of the big drawbacks too, because it can end up being a wedge in your team culture, in your teamwork.
So a cost-benefit analysis, a deep hours-long cost-benefit analysis.
But with that travel time, having the benefit of the travel time, that aids towards a more balanced lifestyle, a bit more time to walk the kids to school rather than push them onto the bus or whatever, and a bit more time to do the food shopping and getting dinner ready and doing homework with the kids. Because if you've got an hour commute every day, that's 2 hours every day, and that's 10 hours every week. That's a lot of good hobbies, self-care, parenting, friendship and relationship nurturing that you can do every single week for 10 weeks. That's 520 hours every year. More than that, but let's pretend we've got a couple of weeks off of public holidays and annual leave and things. So that's a lot of time. One other benefit that I looked at when we did our 2-minute in-depth research was your recruitment base is now quite broad. You can recruit all over the country, in other countries. You can recruit you can tap into so many other areas. And recruitment at the moment is tough. And so that
that's
certainly
true.
is the benefit that some workplaces may have, that now we've got a huge pool of people to choose from. However, there are drawbacks as well. I mean, you were mentioning at the start before we started recording, the workplace safety issues.
Well, yeah. So one of the responsibilities of working from home is that the employer needs to ensure that the environment that the person is going to be working out of is ergonomic and safe and has good lighting. I'm just reading here. Ergonomics, fire safety, emergency preparedness in their home offices. And there is a liability for work-related injuries that occur in the home. And so I know during COVID, a lot of employers needed to actually deck out their employees' homes to give them ergonomic workstations. However, if I choose not to work at that ergonomic workstation, I could do myself an injury and the workplace is responsible for that. But how do they know? So it's an interesting scenario around making sure that people are not just psychologically safe at home, but actually physically safe at home. I don't know if you need to submit your fire safety plan to your workplace, but apparently so, according to my 2-minute research. So it's just something to be aware of, that you do, if you are letting your team work from home, you do actually have a responsibility to ensure that the environment that the person is working in is actually safe, that they're not going to electrocute themselves because they've got power boards and extension leads. And that was one of the things I needed 10 years ago when I had to get approval to work from home. I had to take photos of how my computer's going to connect into power boards and things like that to actually show that I wasn't going to create a fire. Because the employer
With your poor
would be
electrical skills. Plugged into one adapter.
I needed to watch a training video on how to do that properly. So no, I didn't.
So this certainly seems like there are so many benefits and so many drawbacks. And it's going to end up being so unique to that particular organisation, what the roles and responsibilities are of the people who are potentially working from home. As you said, we've just got to do a proper analysis of it, test it and see. And if it works for you, great. But if the drawbacks are evident and they're not ones that are going to be adding to the benefit of the company, then maybe it's best just to bring everyone back on site again.
And I think that's the main take-home message that I have gotten from clients. Ultimately, my clients want their team members to be happy, but actually running particularly because my clients are all smizmas.
Wow.
That's small businesses, just as one word, smiznesses. Yeah. You can add that to your vernacular now. I can't say small businesses, but I can say vernacular. So anyway, so in small business, there's nowhere to hide. Each person who's involved in that business is really important in the business. And so if the work from home doesn't actually contribute to the business, then I think it's well within the business owner's right to say, look, we just can't do it this way, and be prepared to potentially have that person move on because it doesn't suit them. But I think that if you try and be everything to everyone when you're running a small business and a small team, you then end up being nothing to no one.
Yeah, for sure.
And so looking at, how do you want to operate your business, being fair and reasonable and empathetic to individual circumstances? How do you want your team to act and interact? What are the ways that you can actually have the best of both worlds? But ultimately, if it's not working for you in your business and you can't get it to work because each team member is so important in the organisation, then it's okay to say, this is kind of how we have to do it. That's my thought.
Yep,
That's my thought. That's my wrap.
That's it. And this is part of the resilience of life, that not everything works in our favour. Mm-hmm. But we learn to overcome those things, change the way we think about the situation. We can still be happy employees, that's for sure. If we're happy turning up to work one day, we can be happy turning up to work another day. If the only difference is I've been told I can't work from home.
Or just go out and start your own gig. Then you can work from home as much as you like.
That's it. And battle and struggle until you can make ends meet. The entrepreneurial journey.
Start a business, they said. It'd be fun, they said.
What do you mean I have to learn these 527 different things?
527? Golly, you've got a short list, Julie.
Yeah, I should say per year.
per week, per month, per day. So, Julie, I think that's our episode. I think we've already done the wrap with what I think in terms of small business, and obviously what I think is, gospel. So can't really go any further than that.
Instruction how to move forward.
So should I let my team members work from home? It all depends.
It depends. So we're clear on that. Fabulous. Well, I look forward to seeing you next time for another very insightful, instructional podcast next time, Shannon. I wonder what big challenge we're going to tackle next time.
I may be working from home that day, though, Julie, so, I hope that's going to be okay.
I'll check in with you through the week, make sure you're feeling all right.
Can you just make sure that my chair's ergonomic? That'd be great.
I'll get that banquet ready.
I love that. I'm hungry, Julie. Can you provide me with some food? It's already done.
You used to do it when we worked on site together. Well, I look forward to seeing you next time, Shannyn.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, listeners. Catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.